Good evening and welcome to Ek Samvad at Arunim Ankuran. We are celebrating National Science Day, 28th February 2021, and we're in conversation with the pioneer exploration geoscientist of India, Shri S.C. Verma. Welcome to Ek Samvad, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pragya ji. I'm very happy to be here today on Arunima Ankuran. Thank you again for inviting me and interacting with the scientific community. Thank you so much.
Welcome, sir. A word about Arunim Ankuran is an initiative for positive social change through self-development. The goal is greater well-being and happiness for all. We believe that each person is unique and special in some way. Each one of us can make a difference. Each one of us can have an impact. And it's a pleasure and privilege to have S.C. Verma as our guest on Ek Samvad today. He is an MSc AISM in Applied Geophysics from ISM. He's a member, Apex Exploration Research Advisory Committee, AMD, former Regional Director and member, AMD Council, Atomic Minerals Directorate for Exploration and Research, DAE, Government of India. Greetings on National Science Day from Arunim Ankuran to the entire scientific community that is playing a vital role in nation building. The true wealth of a nation consists not in the stored up gold, but in the intellectual capital and physical strength of its people. Professor C.V. Raman discovered the phenomena called Raman scattering in 1928. His groundbreaking work in the field of light scattering earned him the 1930 Nobel Prize for Physics. He was honored with the highest civilian award in India, the Bharat Ratna, in 1954. India celebrates National Science Day on 28th February every year to commemorate the discovery of the Raman effect in 1928. We need a spirit of victory, a spirit that will carry us to our rightful place under the sun. A spirit which will recognize that we, as inheritors of a proud civilization, are entitled to a rightful place on this planet. Our esteemed guest, Shri S.C. Verma, is a pioneer exploration geoscientist who has worked in some of the most difficult and inhospitable terrains of India as a scientist in the Department of Atomic Energy and dedicated most of the best years of his life to building a strong foundation for future scientists in the domain. In his present role, he is member, Apex Exploration Research Advisory Committee, AMD, Department of Atomic Energy, Government of India, Director, Dipon Gas and Infrastructure Limited. In his previous assignments, he has been Senior Advisor, Reliance Industries Limited, International Business Development, Regional Director and member, AMD Council, Atomic Minerals Directorate for Exploration and Research, DAE, Government of India, and member, Atomic Energy Regulatory Board's Safety Review Committee for operating plants and projects of Uranium Corporation of India Limited. We will request Verma sir to talk to us about the milestones of his journey and memorable experiences as a scientist, the role of atomic energy in nation building, skills and qualities needed to develop to become a good scientist, and a message for the student community and society. Arunim Ankuran again extends a warm welcome to you, sir. We would like you to start off with milestones of your journey as a scientist.
Thank you so much for inviting me today, Dr. Pragya Mathur Kumarji. And first of all, I must compliment you on starting this social change platform, this Arunima Ankuran. See, what I strongly believe that the technological changes and the great changes the world is undergoing, the social changes have to keep abreast and apace with that. Because without social change, people will feel lost. You know, the moral values and the social values which you have, they have to be carried with you in the change which you undergo. And particularly, I believe that society bereft of social and moral values, is adrift on a sea of evil. So these values are very, very important. And to that extent, I must compliment you for starting this social change platform. Thank you so much. And now coming to the milestone in my journey, of course, it's been a long journey, and I've been 57 years in this profession. And I started quite early in 1963, and I've been continuously active in this field of uranium and atomic minerals. Not only uranium, all the raw materials which are required for atomic energy. And I worked in different parts of India, and I have had very memorable experiences. I've always considered this as an adventure. Whatever difficulties came, I really enjoyed working through them. I never treated them as difficulties, but as opportunities and an adventure. And I always learned something new. And I came across different people, many people of different regions of India. I came to know different parts of India, and which normally even a tourist would not, moving all over the country, would not know, because I had to go to very interior parts of the northeast. And I have worked in some projects also. I was associated with the safety aspects of this atomic energy as a member of the Atomic Energy Regulatory Board Safety Review Committees and all that. So the social aspects as well as the technical aspects, I was very well aware. When I joined the Atomic Minerals Directorate in 1963, this division was only about 12 years old, 13 years, its 13th year. It was started in 1950, and I had the privilege of working with the pioneers of who had joined the department in 1950, and they were my gurus and guides. And today, since I'm continuing with the department in an advisory capacity, I'm in contact with the younger generation. So I've been in contact with more than 3 generations in this field. And this has given me a lot of insight into the changes which have taken place. The early days when we had very primitive instruments, very primitive knowledge about the uranium geology, the literature was very little, the instruments were very primitive. Now, a lot more developments have taken, technological developments, and a lot of literature has been published, and a lot of researches have been done. So today's generation is very well equipped to pursue this field. I started my career with the second uranium mine in India, that is Narwa Pahad, this is near Jamshedpur, and Jadura being the first mine. And I had the privilege of meeting very great scholars like Dr. Baba. I had interactions with him. Then Dr. Sarabhai, I interacted with him. Dr. Setna, Dr. Srinivasan, Dr. Raja Ramanna, Dr. Anger. I met each of them personally and had personal interaction with all them. I was very fortunate in this respect to have had interactions with them. And then apart from that, of course, I had the occasion prior to joining Atomic Energy of meeting scholars like Lal Bahadur Shastri ji, K.D. Malviya, who was the first petroleum minister of India. And then abroad, I was given certain assignments. I was sent to International Atomic Energy Agency in 1988 December to participate in an advisory group meeting. I was the sole representative of India. There were 6 countries in the advisory group. India was one of them, Canada, France, Russia, at that time it was the USSR, and some couple of other countries. And I had the opportunity to interact with the international community in this field also. And the proceedings of that, it was a 3-day-long meeting. Then again, I was deputed to Vietnam abroad for finding uranium in that. They had invited a team of experts. I was leading the team, and had the opportunity. And in fact, I had the good fortune of finding a very major uranium province or deposit for them. And this was a major find which was really appreciated by the Vietnamese side. And as I was invited with all their VIPs to meet them. It was about 1,000 kilometers south of Hanoi. And then we had the governor of Da Nang province where this deposit lay. He invited me to meet him. I met the governor there on tea. Then I was invited by General Vo Nguyen Gia who was at that time the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister in charge of Science and Technology, and he's well known as the hero of the Battle of Dien Bien Phu in 1976, which defeated the Americans and ousted the Americans from Vietnam. So he was a legendary. He was 76 years old at that time. I met him in the State Guest House, and the ambassador and then head of Chancery, they accompanied me. And at that time, the head of Chancery and the first secretary in the embassy was Mr. Shingla, who is present day Foreign Secretary of India. And earlier he was India's ambassador to the US. And I had the privilege of meeting these people. He is also Mr. Shingla, and the ambassador invited her. So I had a great adventurous experiences in my journey in the AMD. And it's not only finding uranium, but learning so many things. In the Northeast, I met various tribes, and even the underground in the Mizos who were carrying guns. I met them in the jungles, interacted with them. And then a lot of wildlife. I mean, it's full of wildlife, all kinds of wildlife I came across. Herds of white elephants, see pythons and snakes and all sorts of the wildlife. And it was a real pleasure to work there in the Northeast and know the people there, understand the people there. And there was a real pleasure, and they were very helpful. If you understand them, they are great people. And similarly, when I was in Vietnam, I had the pleasure to meet with the former rebels. You know, they were known as the Viet Cong guerrillas. So they were traveling with me when we went on. We drove about 1,000 kilometers out of Vietnam. The driver was an ex-Viet Cong guerrilla. He had been fighting in Cambodia and all that. So all types of people had this good fortune. So my journey in atomic minerals has been a great adventure, and which I've really enjoyed. And I've been moving with my family, so my family also enjoyed it. Thank you so much. For giving me this opportunity to share these experiences.
It's a privilege, sir. It's indeed a privilege. Because we are talking in the context of National Science Day, we'd like you to share a little bit about the role of atomic energy in nation building.
Yes, that is a very relevant question, because see, India is still short of the required electrical power. Though currently we are generating the third largest share in the world, 371 gigawatts of electrical power. But the modern technology, modern society is power hungry, needs more and more energy, more and more, and the sustainable sources and the continuous supply. There should be no break, and we have various sources, and atomic energy is one of them, and which has a long-term goal. So because we have what we call the fossil fuels like coal and oil, and these will not last forever. Of course, we have a long chain. India is short of thermal coal, what we call good quality. We have to import. Earlier we were importing from Indonesia, we are importing from Australia. South Africa is good quality coal, low ash content, high calorific value. That is important. So the amount of energy which it contains per ton is important. It's not the total tonnage of coal which you have. Our ash percentage is very high, and the more the ash is there, and the more radiation also it emits. So very few people know about the safety aspect of this atomic energy. So it has been estimated that there is an international for radiation protection. They have laid down certain norms for safety, and so far as the different sources of power supply, electrical power generation are concerned, there has been an estimate made. These normalized values are in terms of, they're known as man-sievert per gigawatt year. So if you take this as a unit, so if you know the coal has the highest radiation exposure rate, that is 4. What we call this man-sievert per gigawatt year. That is 4 for coal. Whereas for atomic energy, it is just 2.5. For oil, for geothermal, it is 2. And the lowest is for natural LNG base station, that is 0.03. So you can see the relative radiation hazards from the different sources which produce electricity. And India is not endowed with very rich uranium, but we have a large tonnage of uranium in this country. More than 3.5 lakh tons of uranium as resources have been established in the country. But then there are problems because there are certain areas where you cannot mine, ecologically fragile areas. You cannot go for mining reserve forests, tiger reserves, and things like that. So deposits lie in many areas. Some areas are workable, some areas in the present context are not workable. But whatever strategy we have adopted, we have using the natural uranium in heavy water plants. So we use that, and we have established a large number of nuclear reactors, and we have a good track in safety record compared to the mishaps which happened elsewhere in the world. India has been accidentally all these years. The work started very early in India, and atomic part, I think 1956, a lot of first reactor came from Canada. There was a small reactor, Apsara it is named. Thereafter, India built its own reactor. See, we did a nuclear explosion, we called it implosion in 1974. And all foreign aid was cut off in this field. From Canada was supplying these reactors, they shut off the aid, and then India had to develop also. So this was an opportunity to develop. So long as you are dependent on others, you don't develop. The moment you find the external help is cut off, you start developing. And this was a blessing in disguise for India. And we have developed in the nuclear field. India has developed is quite far ahead in the world today. And today the share of nuclear power is very little, but by the year 2050 we expect it to grow enormously. Today it is hardly 3% or so of the total electrical power generated in the country. Because there are so many other issues, because we cannot import the fuel because we are not members of the nuclear suppliers group, and then we have not signed a nuclear proliferation treaty. So some constraints are there. Once these are overcome, because there are many countries who want to sell uranium, they have no use for the uranium. They've got large resources, and they want to sell. They would like to sell. They want to sell their reactors also. So they are known as light water reactors. We have got the heavy water reactors. So the US wants to sell them. Japan wants to sell. A lot of countries want to sell their reactors. France wants to sell. They are very advanced in reactor technology. So there is a lot of scope in this field for India. And many countries are already using nuclear power to a very large extent. France, for instance, 75% of its power supply is from nuclear power. So it has a great potential.
As a layperson, there are a lot of apprehensions in society about atomic energy as such. So would you like to dispel some of those?
Yes. So the point is these apprehensions have come from the initial some major mishaps that took place in the world. So this was the cause of the apprehension. So 3 Mile Island in the US, the Chernobyl in the former Soviet Union. Then the most recent one was in Japan, as Fukushima 2011. In 2011, that was the tsunami. It was a real time tsunami. So because it was a low-lying thing and it got flooded, the pumps. Now see, they have got now the new types of reactors which will not be vulnerable to these accidents, and new types of fuels which have been developed. And very few people know about it, because we still think that the old type of reactors are in use. Say, for instance, the cooling water pumps were in this basement, and it got flooded, the power supply got cut off, the cooling system failed, and there was a runaway nuclear chain reaction which led to a meltdown and the mishap. Now we have gravity dumping systems, even if there were no power supplies there, and they store at a higher level what they call borated water. The boron is an absorber of neutron. So any substance it will absorb, so it will stop the chain reaction. So we have got fail-safe devices now. So you have these devices which are now new types of reactors which are there. And this new technology and the new types of fuels which are now coming up will make it very, very safe for And the layman does not know this. So a lot of public awareness program is required. And the Department of Atomic Energy conducts these public awareness programs to different ways, right? And it targets the students also. Even at Nagpur in the central region, every year there's an exhibition. Students from all the schools and junior colleges are invited, and they are shown everything, and they are even allowed to do hands-on experiments. So the new generation is being exposed to these things, so they will understand better.
Right.
So this is a program Atomic Energy has already got, and they are doing it for quite a long time now.
Yes.
This public awareness program is there. But the most important is educating the non-scientific community.
Yes.
So the scientific community can easily, you can tell them what the scientific facts are, but the common people, so that is the difficult part, to convince them, you know.
So what are some of the things that you can suggest, you know, to develop scientific temper as a community?
Yes. Yeah. So to say, as a community, you know, the people, the society requires all types of people. It requires scientific people. It requires the creative people. You know which type of your brain is developed. Some people are born creative. Some people are born with an analytical mind. So the people with the analytical mind, they really make the good scientists. But to make a balanced scientist, you have to have a creative mind also. You know, understand the social aspects of your scientific work. And so the most important part for developing science is an inquiring mind. And imagination is more important than knowledge, as Einstein said. They must have a very good imagination. It has been said, what can be imagined can be achieved. So what can be imagined can be achieved. So it all starts in the imagination. Any discovery or whatever machineries or equipments or whatever is made, it first takes shape in the mind. Then it is translated into on paper, into plans and programs, and then executed. So everything starts in the brain. So it starts with the imagination. The people with a good imagination would make the best scientists, and an inquiring mind, and they should weigh the various options, what is plausible, what is not option. So these are the things which are required for the studies. And the training has to start at a very early formative years. The parents have to judge the aptitude of the child. And the people who have this kind of temper are the ones who should go for this. And it's not necessary everybody should become a doctor or an engineer or a scientist. But the unfortunate part in India today is very few people are going for the basic sciences like physics, chemistry, maths, and all that. They go for the applied sciences, they go for the engineering, they go for the medicine. Of course, we need engineers. We know we are short of engineers, we are short of doctors and medical staff and all. They are required. Definitely, they are very much required. And we need them. At the same time, see, the pure research in science is needed. It has to be at least 20 years ahead of applied science so that the science can develop in the right direction. So we need to attract more people, and that requires a passion. People who have a passion. See, the best example which comes to my mind in India was a mathematician, Ramanujan. Everybody has a Ramanujan. So he was simply pouring out mathematics, and he died very young. At the age of 30, he had achieved so much. He was sent to the UK. He was a clerk in the port commissioners in Madras in those days, and he was picked up. The British masters, they recognized his talent because he was all the time making, so not playing with numbers and all that. And the equation which he made, formula. So those concepts are the black hole, which we know today. The science talks about black holes in astronomy. He was already there in his mathematical formulae, you know, the Ramanujan, where there was no concept. And he had that in the mathematical form. But mathematics is nothing but a shorthand of science. And what it physically means, the teacher has to bring it home to the students. What does mathematics mean? Because for many students, mathematics is a bugbear. They like to avoid mathematics. And that is the basis for science. Without mathematics, you can't. So mathematics is very important, and it is for the teacher to make it attractive to the students, it depends on the teacher. For the otherwise, ordinary student will try to avoid maths. But if the teacher is able to inspire him, fire his imagination, he will do wonders in maths also.
Would you like to recall any specific teachers that come to your mind from your own student life?
Oh yes, I had some very good teachers. I'm very fortunate to have good teachers. And again, I would say, so teaching as a profession is all right. A lot of people are there. We need teachers. There are so many schools, so many educations, so many institutes of technologies. We need professors. We need good teachers. But the teachers have to be very good communicators. Their knowledge may be very, very great. They may be good research. They must have done a lot, published a lot of it. But how much is it they are able to communicate to the student? That is very important. The link between the teacher and the student. So how easy they are able to see? I used to read in the old days the professors how they interacted with the student in Oxford or Cambridge. The professors, it's not in class, they would sit with them in the room even after class, and they would be blowing smoke into them. They used to smoke in those days, and inspiring the student, telling them, and cross check. So the students should be free to ask questions, and the professor should satisfy their curiosity. So if you recall, Galileo had said, see, the freely to question and freely to answer is the object of all science. So there should be, there's not just you give a lecture and go away from the class. There should be a lot of question answer sessions. So there is a, I know, constraint, but the schools have very large number of students. There are so many sections in each class, 5 or 6 sections, and a large number, 30, 40, 50 students in each section. So it is really difficult for a teacher to interact with each student individually. But still, the teacher has to be more of a guru or a mentor rather than an adhyapa, as I say. So that should be the goal of a teacher, to become a guru and see how much he can inspire his students. And that will be his measure of his success as a teacher.
Who are the teachers you remember?
Oh yes, I had very good teachers in school. When I went to all kinds of school. I went to a village school also. My father was a mining engineer. In that mining community, all labor colonies were there. So very few educated people were there, and we had a school there. The teachers were very good. Even in those, they used to teach us. And then I went to a school. I was born in Bikaner in Rajasthan. There was a school next door. I went there. The principal there, he was my private tutor also. He used to come up. He was very strict, a very strict person, and he taught me mathematics. So when I went to later on to what I had learned at home, so when I went to this Irish Christian brothers, they were running St. Patrick's. I went to, so all the teachers were from Ireland or from Belgium or from Germany. So they're all Europeans. So first year I knew English, but I had a great problem. I could not catch their pronunciation. So what they were saying, I didn't know. I was sitting in class almost blank. So 1 year I had a problem. But from next year, I was in a boarding school. So all the time, the only language spoken was English. You could not speak your mother tongue. So I picked up the pronunciation and the language. So then I found those teachers, and they were really dedicated teachers because they were the Irish teachers, but they were missionaries. They had no families. Those students were their family. They stayed in the school. They played games with us. They took classes. They supervised our study period. So they spent all the time with us. So they were really dedicated people. So I found them, each one of them was a real gem, I would say. And they remembered, even after years, I met one of my old science teachers who I did my senior Cambridge in 1954. And then he was my science teacher. In 1976, I went to Shillong, St. Edmund's School, to admit my 2 sons there. And then I found my old science teacher was there.
Wonderful.
The heart. He recognized me immediately. He was seeing me after 22 years, but he recognized me immediately. He said, "Oh, you were one of the bright boys."
Wonderful. How nice.
So the teachers also remember the students, they never forgot them. So
Yes.
that was a great interaction. And then when I went to the university, uh, there were very good, eminent teachers there. So the professors in physics were all well-known personalities like Dr. Murli Marnod Joshi. He was in the physics department. Prior to that, of course, before I joined, Dr. Meghnad Saha was there. He was again a great physicist. So these people all were allowed. And then the teacher who was teaching me optics, he had a very great command over the students, a huge class of 80 students, and he would take a roll call. And anybody made a proxy, he would not lift his head. He would simply repeat the name gently, and that's how I would not repeat the proxy. And so he commanded great respect, and he was none other than Mr. Rajendra Singh, who was later known as Raju Bhaiya, who became chief of the Rashtriya Sevak Sangh in Nagpur. He was here. So he was a great personality. I had the opportunity of having such great teachers. And in the School of Mines, again, I had very good teachers. There was a Professor Singh, who was the head of the geophysics department. He had done his PhD from UK, from London Imperial College of Science and Technology. So he was my teacher who taught me geophysics. And they were very good teachers. So when I finished my MSc, I asked him for a testimonial. So the right down, I need, sometimes you need, so when you are looking for a job, you want the testimonials and character certificates and all that sort of things have to be submitted. So he was such a simple person. He said, okay, you write down what you want, I will sign it. And so I had to write down my own, he simply signed it. He was such a great person, he trusted his students, and I didn't write anything which was not warranted, but he simply asked me to write and he signed it. So I had inspiring teachers.
Yes. Yes. You've had a beautiful innings as a scientist. What would you like to say to the young student out there who's looking forward to becoming a scientist? What are some of the skills, qualities that they should try to focus on so that they can excel in this field?
Yes, the first thing I would like to, before I tell the students, I would like to tell the parents. Do you recognize your child's inclinations, what he wants, and you should encourage and bolster that, what he wants, because most parents want their children to be successful in life. That is natural, I think. Every parent wants it. He's seeing the world around him, people going to IIT, going abroad to higher studies to Harvard or such and such place. So everybody wants his child should do well. So naturally they start pushing the child in that direction. But first of all, you are a psychologist, you would understand this much better. So you have to understand the child's psychology. And first 3 years of a child are very important. A mother's attention is required. The sense of security has to be instilled in the child, and only a mother can do that. First 3 years, the mother should give undivided attention to the child. Otherwise, they imbibe a sense of insecurity. They tend to become even violent. Insecure people are violent. What we want in society are good individuals. We don't want very successful. Society wants good individuals, men of worth, who make a good society. So what does the society need? Good individuals. You may have very learned persons for it. They can be leaders of society, but the general mass of society should have the right values, and they should be men or women of worth. So being a person of worth is more important than being a person of success. So what is so important? That is what I always see. But the general mass of the people are not at the top. They are in the middle or below. Only a few people are at the top. So everybody, those who have got the merit will automatically there. They don't have to pursue marks. They pursue their passion. the success will come to them. They don't have to chase success. So people are mostly say studying to get marks. Don't study to get marks. Study to gain understanding, improve your knowledge, gain understanding, or under your thinking power, to develop your thinking power. The rest will automatically come. So this is what I would like to tell the student: follow your own persuasions, inclination, and the parents should encourage him in that. Everybody has a different inclination, and somebody may become a very good musician, somebody becomes an actor, somebody becomes an administrator, somebody becomes a scientist. So everybody should be allowed to pursue his passion. So you first recognize what a child's passion. There is a, we have a system of counseling. Students are counseled, but they are counseled for particular careers. So people are generally career oriented. So once you become career oriented, then the students are churning out stereotypes. So whether you want to be in the crowd or you want to stand apart, it depends on the individual.
Such a pleasure talking to you, sir. Is there something you would like to say to the scientific community? You're a pioneer. Is there a message you have for the scientific community?
Yes, certainly. Because I have observed the scientific community from very close quarters, having worked with them, and some of them are really passionate about the work, and some of them are just career scientists. So most of the scientists in the institute, so the government has set up these Council of Scientific and Scientific and Industrial, CSIR. There's so many national laboratories, and the scientists. But unfortunately, most of them are not scientists. They are looking for experiments. They are hardly concentrating on the work, because if they think they concentrate on the work, they will be left behind. So this is one of the major problems which I have observed. And you see that there are a lot of people are, what is the yardstick for measuring is scientists? So they are, say, their performance is reviewed every 4 or 5 years or whatever. How many publications you made? So people are busy publishing papers. Whether that paper has any worth or not. So there's in the scientific, like what I call, there's a lot of paper pollution. So 90% of the paper are not what the paper on which they are written, the scientific papers. Only about 5 to 10% are of real worth. So the scientific community, they don't have to look for the next promotion. They have to concentrate on the work. They should have a passion for their work. So I remember in my department, there was a physicist. So he was so that some people are, we don't have this facility, we don't have that facility. So he was telling the head of the physics group, we are lacking this facility, we're lacking here. So the head physics group asked him a simple question. Mr. So-and-so, how does a gold leaf electroscope work? That is taught in the high school or intermediate, and he was an MSc and all that in physics. He did not know how a gold leaf electroscope was. I said, you are grumbling about not having facility. You don't know the basic of your physics. So there are people who are, real senior, who was a director at that time. When new people join the department, AMD or any department, they should be placed under the charge of people with positive outlook who can inspire them. Because there are many grumblers in any department, any sphere of life. I said, never put them there, otherwise they will also learn only the negative traits. So the people who join should be put in the right environment in any department. So the people who are placing the people should see, not just send anybody for any assignment. That is not the way. You should. So the first few years in the department, they will have respect for the department. Otherwise, they will be simply cursing in the department. We don't have this. We don't have this. So that should not happen.
Yes.
The government provides a lot of money to these institutions, but is it well utilized? That has to be seen.
Yeah. So before we finally close this conversation, sir, is there a particular experience as a scientist that you would like to share with the community that is very memorable for you?
When I was to say this was an unconventional career which I chose, because I was a physicist. I applied to the advertisement for mining engineers and geologists. Anyway, I applied for that, and I was called for interview in South Block in Central Secretariat, New Delhi. Dr. D.N. Wadia, he was a geological advisor of the Government of India. So he interviewed me. He looked at my biodata, said, did your BSc from Harvard, history, physics, chemistry, math? You did not have geology. I said, no, sir. You did your geophysics from school. You did not do geology. But you study geology. I said, Rams have taught, the succession of the Himalayas and the mineral wealth of the Himalayan and all sorts of geological questions. And I could answer them. And then they asked me about construction of a centralometer, with the radiation instruments. I could answer all the questions. So I was selected. And he finally asked me, how many kilometers in a day you going to? I said, 25 kilometers. Because the geologists in those days, we were not provided with jeep. In the cabs, we used to walk with our maps and all to our HR for discussion near Jamshedpur. And from our field camp in Narwapar, it was 12 to 13 kilometers. Walk up and walk down to about 25, 26 kilometers. For our official work, we used to walk. And we used to meet some wild elephants on the way sometimes also in the night. So while walking back, we met wildlife. So these things happen. But we were quite happy. We were sleeping in tents, and we were happy with whatever facility we had because we were concentrating on our work.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So thank
and
you.
we were never bothered about it.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your valuable experiences and insights with us on National Science Day. And as a scientist, I think on behalf of the community, perhaps we should be saying thank you to you for your contribution to building the foundation so beautifully for the future generations. It's been a pleasure talking to you and sharing your insights. Thank you, sir. Thank you from Aruni Mangpuri.
Thank you so much. I think it was a real pleasure for me too for interacting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.